Hi, this is David with a demo of the Just Culture assessment tool as of November 19th, 2017. Today we're going to look at the manager role and show some of the typical operations that a manager can do in the system. I've got the tool launched and ready to go already. Actually, I'm going to back out just to show you what the login screens look like. Actually, they're pretty simple. When you log in, you're asked for a email address. Type that in. It remembers it from the previous session if you had a previous session. Just click next and then go ahead and enter your password in here, and then you can log in. Pretty typical of most systems these days. As you can see, I have a little pre-filled data this time around. I myself am logged in as manager 1. I already have an employee pre-populated here, and I'm going to start the demo by creating a second employee, which is something a manager would typically do. So I right-click on myself to get the context menu, select the new employee option, and then I'm going to make up some data here. I'll just call this person employee 2. I'll give him a email address. Actually, the email is the only required field on this screen. All the others are optional, but the email is the one essential ingredient to create an employee. So I'll just enter that data, and I'm going to take a look at the direct manager drop down here and make sure it's set to me, since this is going to be my employee. The other information I'm just going to leave blank, since we really don't need it for now. And I will go ahead and save that person. Now, Just Culture assessment tool is for creating performance assessments when essentially something has gone wrong in a place of business. So I'm going to go ahead and create an assessment and just make up some sample data so that you can see all of the screens. We're going to start by the event title of the incident that happened here. I'm just going to call the event something silly like oops for now. Location can be whatever the customer wants. We'll just say this happened in building number 1, and it happened over the time of November 14th and say 15th. This field, the assessment created date and time, gets filled automatically. It's essentially a timestamp that you can't change, similar to the last date and time, which you also cannot change. The employee is the subject of the investigation, and the author in this case is myself. I'm going to go into some details about the investigation. Let's make up some data about some damage to an MRI unit in a hospital, just for example. So I'll just say MRI damage, what normally happens, something simple, MRI undamaged. What does the procedure require? We'll say requires careful assessment of what is being carried into the MRI unit. What happened? Well, let's say a cell phone got loose when the MRI was turned on. how is the organization managing risk? Let's say that the organization, they had signs prohibiting electronic devices, and maybe also the lab technician was trained to eliminate electronic devices before entering the lab. I'll leave the additional comments blank. Let's go ahead and skip down to the attachments dialog. Here we can attach arbitrary files to our assessment. I'm just going to grab a random file off of my machine somewhere. Let's see, we'll go into my home directory backups, and I've got a text file lying around. This is actually the specs of my computer. It has nothing to do with it. It makes a perfectly good attachment. So there, that file is attached, and if we wanted to view it like that, we could just double click on it to view the attachment. The attachment viewer launches whatever programs are associated with the file type that is given in the attachment name. Let's go ahead and do a little more detail on our assessment here. I'm going to add a breach. A breach is essentially when an employee does not follow a particular rule or procedure, and it is the beginning of the Just Culture algorithm is to kind of select the breach type and give some basic information. So let's say in this case the employee forgot to follow a procedural rule. We'll click that, and the conduct was that he skipped asking patient about carried items, and the expectation is simply that he always asks patients about carried items. And then we'll go ahead and start filling out the next section of the report. We'll go to the algorithm, and I'm going to make my screen a little larger here so we can see the algorithm in full. And here we have a flowchart that kind of steps through the assessor in order to figure out what they should do about the employee that made this mistake. Let's just go ahead and go through this. Was the duty to follow the rule known to the employee? Yes, they knew they were supposed to ask all patients to remove their carried items. We'll just click yes there. Was it possible to follow a rule? Sure, he could have done it. Did the employee knowingly violate the rule? Let's say that there's some question about this, and maybe I want to add some notes to clarify my thinking about it. Let's say, for example, we'll make up a little note. Employees, we'll say the employee had not received his training refresher course. So this is something maybe he had been told to do at one time, but it wasn't on his mind when this incident occurred. Let's say further we're thinking about this question in our tree now, and we're not really sure if we're answering it properly. We can get some help here. You'll notice these green little balance scales up the top right is access to our video help system, and I can pop that up. Gives me some basic information about the question that I'm visiting, some example data, a little more detailed explanation. But let's say I want to watch a video that is specifically about this question. I'll go ahead and click the video here. Okay, so that gives me a little more information about this particular part of the chart, and I'm going to say that no, the employee didn't knowingly violate it. Perhaps it just wasn't on his mind, but he wasn't being defiant or anything like that. So we'll click no, and here I'm taking to the terminal node of this path. That basically says no, there's not going to be any punitive conduct here or anything like that. This was a unfortunate human error, and since there are no more nodes to click on with yes/no answers, we're pretty much done with this part of the chart. So I'm going to go back to the navigation tree here, go to the next item down in the tree, which are the actions taken as a result of this finding. So let's say we decided that the way we're going to handle this is make sure the training is kept up to date. So I'll just put a little note in there, and we'll say the action that we're given to the employee was sent to refresh the training. Alright, and that's pretty much it for this particular incident. I've got a bunch of sample data in there, and now I want to take a look at what does the report look like if we compile all this data that I typed in into a nice PDF image. So we give it a second to calculate the report, and now we have this nice printable report format with all of the details that I just put in. It even includes a snapshot of the path that I took through the algorithm to decide what my resolution was. A whole bunch of date and time stamps, let me know when this was done, when it was completed. Here's my action plan, and a couple definitions that are used in the wording in the report above. So let's say, for example, I wanted to take this and print it out. I just hit the print button. I'm going to set it to a PDF printer. That's kind of a virtual device here. And we'll do my report here. Save that so I have a file on my system somewhere. I'll just do a quick demo. Let's open that, make sure it looks good there in my home directory here. Okay, there's my report. And there it is in all its PDF glory there. Close that out. And that pretty much concludes the demo for today. We just kind of breezed through all the screens of an employee, his data, created one assessment for him, put in some notes for all the components of that assessment, took a brief look at the report that's generated and printed it out. That concludes the demo for today.